respected. If he chooses another woman, let him. I know those words can hurt, especially when your heart is still hoping he will turn around and realize what he lost. But listen to me carefully. The moment you stop fighting for a man who has already made his choice, you begin fighting for something far more important, yourself. Maybe right now you're asking, what did she have that I didn't? Maybe you're looking at her pictures, comparing her beauty to yours, her life to yours, her personality to yours. Maybe you're replaying every conversation, wondering what you could have done differently. Maybe you're thinking that if you had been a little more patient, a little more attractive, a little less emotional, or a little easier to love, he would have chosen you. But that's where you are making his decision mean something it was never qualified to mean. His choice is not a measurement of your worth. Let that sink in. A man choosing another woman does not automatically mean she is better than you. It does not mean you failed. It does not mean you were not beautiful enough, interesting enough, loving enough, or valuable enough. It means he made a choice. And painful as that choice may be, you have another choice to make. You can spend the next 6 months trying to understand why he chose her. Or you can spend those 6 months becoming the woman who no longer needs his choice to feel valuable. Because here's what happens when you chase someone who has already chosen to walk away. You slowly begin abandoning yourself. You check your phone more than you check your own emotions. You look at his social media more than you look at your own future. You wonder who she's with, where they went, what he told her, whether he loves her, whether he misses you. And every answer you don't have creates another question. You become a detective in a relationship that isn't even yours anymore. And the saddest part is that while you're trying to figure out why he chose another woman, your own life is sitting there waiting for you. There was a woman named Claire who learned this lesson the hard way. She had loved Daniel for almost 4 years. She believed they were building towards something permanent. They talked about marriage. They talked about traveling together. They had plans. And then one day, Daniel told her that he had met someone else. Claire felt like the floor disappeared beneath her. She couldn't understand it. She kept thinking, how could 4 years mean so little? But the painful truth was that 4 years could mean something and still end. A relationship can have beautiful memories and still reach its ending. Love can have been real and still not be enough to make two people compatible forever. And Claire didn't understand that at first. She wanted an explanation that would make the pain disappear. She wanted Daniel to tell her that the other woman wasn't better. She wanted him to say that he was confused. She wanted him to admit that he had made a mistake. She wanted something that would restore her sense of worth. So she started checking. She checked his social media. Then she checked hers. Then she checked the woman's social media. She looked at photographs. She noticed clothes. She noticed places they visited. She noticed smiles. And suddenly a woman she had never even met became the person against whom Claire measured herself. That is what heartbreak can do when you don't protect your mind. It can make a stranger look like a verdict. Claire began asking herself questions that had no healthy answers. Is she prettier? Is she more feminine? Does she make him happier? Is she more exciting? Did I become boring? Was I too emotional? Was I too available? And every question made her feel smaller. Until one night, she looked at herself in the mirror and realized something heartbreaking. She had started seeing herself through the eyes of a man who had already decided to leave. That was the moment something changed. She realized she had been giving Daniel the power to define her, and he never asked for that responsibility. She had handed it to him. That is what many people do after rejection. They allow someone else's decision to become their identity. But rejection is an event. It is not a definition. Someone can reject a relationship with you without rejecting your value as a human being. Someone can decide they want a different life without proving that your life is less meaningful. Someone can choose another person without making that person superior to you. Compatibility is not a beauty contest. Love is not a scoreboard. Relationships are not trophies awarded to the person who performs the best. And you have to stop treating another woman's presence as evidence that you were not enough. She is living her life. You need to start living yours. Because the moment you stop competing, you get your energy back. And Claire eventually discovered that the woman she had been fighting was never really the other woman. It was the version of herself who believed she had to be chosen to be valuable. That was the real enemy. Not another woman, not Daniel, not the breakup. The belief that someone else's decision could determine her worth. And once she challenged that belief, everything began to change. She didn't wake up one morning and stop loving him. That's not how healing works. She still missed him. She still remembered his voice. She still thought about the good times. She still had moments when she wished things had turned out differently. But slowly, she stopped turning those feelings into actions. She stopped texting. She stopped checking. She stopped asking mutual friends for updates. She stopped posting things designed to make him wonder what she was doing. And most importantly, she stopped trying to prove that she was doing better without him, because she realized something powerful. If you're genuinely healing, you don't need the person who hurt you to witness it. You don't need him to see your glow up. You don't need him to notice your new clothes. You don't need him to see you smiling. Don't need him to wonder whether you're happier. You simply become happier, quietly, for yourself. And that is where the real transformation begins. Because maybe he comes back. Maybe he doesn't. But what happens when you become so emotionally grounded that either outcome no longer controls your life? What happens when his decision stops being the center of your story? What happens when you finally realize that losing someone who didn't choose you may have created the space for you to choose yourself? That's where Claire's story was about to become completely different, because the hardest part wasn't letting Daniel go. The hardest part was discovering who she would become once she stopped trying to make him stay. Claire's first real victory came when she stopped trying to make Daniel notice her absence. At first, it felt almost impossible. Every morning, there was that instinct to check her phone. Every evening, there was that temptation to look at his profile. And sometimes, she would catch herself wondering whether he was thinking about her. But she began asking herself a different question. Why does it matter whether he notices? That question changed something inside her. Because if she was healing only because she hoped Daniel would eventually see what he had lost, then Daniel was still at the center of her life. She had stopped calling him, but she had not truly let him go. Her body had moved forward. Her mind was still standing outside his door. And she realized that letting go for the purpose of making someone come back is not really letting go. It is waiting. It is waiting with hope disguised as independence. It is saying, I don't need him, while secretly checking whether he has finally realized that he needs you. Claire wanted something deeper than that. She wanted freedom. So she made a decision. She would no longer do anything with Daniel in mind. If she went somewhere beautiful, she would enjoy it because she wanted to. If she dressed differently, it would be because she liked how she felt. If she smiled in a photograph, it would not be because she hoped he would see it. She stopped performing her healing. She started living it, and slowly, her days began filling with things that had nothing to do with Daniel. She reconnected with an old friend. She started exercising again. She returned to a creative hobby she had abandoned during the relationship. She began making plans for the future, and something beautiful happened. Her life became bigger than the breakup. The silence that once felt like punishment began feeling like space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to discover what she actually wanted. Because when you're deeply attached to someone, you can become so focused on keeping them that you stop asking whether the relationship is actually good for you. You start accepting things you once promised yourself you would never accept. You excuse inconsistency. You overlook disrespect. You rationalize emotional distance. You tell yourself he is just going through something. And maybe he is. But understanding someone does not mean you have to accept everything they do. Claire began thinking about the relationship differently. She remembered the good moments, but she also remembered the moments when she felt alone while sitting right next to him. She remembered conversations she had been afraid to have. She remembered how often she had questioned whether he was truly committed. She remembered how many times she had tried to make herself easier to love. And suddenly, the breakup looked different. It wasn't just a man choosing another woman. It was a relationship revealing what it had already become. That realization hurt, but it also gave her peace, because sometimes we don't miss the actual relationship. We miss the version of the relationship we hoped it would become. We miss the future we imagined. We miss the person we thought they would eventually become. We miss the feeling we had during the best moments. And those things can be very difficult to separate from reality. Claire finally asked herself a question she had avoided for years. If Daniel had never left, would I have been happy staying exactly where I was? She sat with that question, and the answer wasn't simple. There had been happiness, there had been love, but there had also been uncertainty. And she realized that she had been so afraid of losing him that she had never honestly asked whether she was losing herself. That is the question heartbreak forces you to confront. Who were you becoming while trying to keep someone? Were you becoming more confident or more anxious? Were you becoming more secure or more dependent on reassurance? Were you becoming more yourself? Or were you constantly adjusting yourself to keep someone interested? Claire understood that she had been slowly disappearing, not because Daniel had demanded it, but because she had been afraid that if she showed her full needs, he might leave. And now that he had left anyway, she finally understood the cost. You cannot build a healthy relationship by constantly negotiating against your own needs. You cannot become lovable by becoming invisible, and you cannot keep someone by becoming someone else. That was when Claire stopped asking, how do I get him back? She started asking, how do I get me back? That question gave her something Daniel never could: direction. She began setting boundaries in every area of her life. She became more selective about who received her energy. She stopped explaining herself to people who had already decided to misunderstand her. She stopped chasing conversations that were one-sided. She stopped accepting half effort just because she had feelings. And slowly, her confidence returned. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind where you don't need to announce that you have changed. The kind where you simply know, you know what you deserve, you know what you will tolerate, you know what you will never tolerate again. And then something unexpected happened. Months after the breakup, Claire was at a small restaurant with her friend when she saw Daniel. For a second, everything inside her froze. There he was, the person she had spent months trying not to think about, and he was with the other woman. Claire felt the old pain immediately. Her chest tightened, her mind started racing. She looked at the woman beside him. For a moment, the old comparison returned, but then Claire took a breath and something inside her had changed. She looked at Daniel. Then she looked at herself, and she realized she no longer wanted to compete. Not because she believed she was better than the other woman, because she finally understood that she was never supposed to compete at all. She quietly looked away. She continued her conversation. She smiled. And for the first time, she didn't need Daniel to notice. She didn't need him to see her. She didn't need him to regret anything. She didn't need the other woman to disappear. She simply needed to remain herself. That night, Claire cried. But the tears were different. They weren't the tears of someone begging the past to return. They were the tears of someone finally accepting that the past had already taught her what it needed to teach. And that's when she understood what winning really meant. Winning was not making Daniel jealous. Winning was not becoming more beautiful than the woman he chose. Winning was not waiting for him to come crawling back. Winning was not proving that he made the wrong decision. Winning was reaching the point where his decision no longer determined how she saw herself, that is freedom. And once you reach that place, something remarkable happens. You stop asking whether he will come back. You start asking whether you would even want him back. Because the woman who was desperate for his attention is not the same woman who is standing now. And that is where everything changes. If Daniel ever returned, Claire would not be waiting at the door with the same expectations. She would have questions, not because she wanted to punish him, because she had learned to protect herself. She would want to know what changed. She would want to know whether he understood what happened. She would want to know whether he was returning because he genuinely valued her or because he simply missed having access to someone who loved him. And she finally understood that those are two completely different things, because someone can miss you without being ready for you. Someone can regret losing you without being capable of loving you properly. Someone can come back because loneliness hurts, not because they have grown. So if he ever comes back, don't just listen to the words. Watch the behavior. Because the woman who has finally chosen herself does not get hypnotized by a beautiful apology. She looks for consistency. She looks for accountability. She looks for effort. She looks for change. And most importantly, she asks herself one question. Does this person now bring something healthy into my life? Or am I being invited back into the same cycle? That question can save you years of pain, because sometimes a person returns and the relationship deserves another chance. And sometimes they return simply because they cannot stand the idea of you becoming happy without them. You have to know the difference. And Claire was finally becoming the kind of woman who could tell. Claire had finally learned how to let go of Daniel. But now she had to learn something even harder: how to remain herself if he ever came back. Because letting go is one thing when someone is gone. It is another thing when the person you once begged to stay suddenly appears again with regret in his eyes and memories in his voice. And this is where many people lose the progress they fought so hard to build. They think, he came back, I won. But no, his return is not the victory. Your ability to make a clear decision without abandoning yourself is the victory. Claire understood that now. So when Daniel eventually contacted her, she didn't respond with anger. She didn't respond with excitement either. She simply listened. He told her he had been thinking about everything. He told her he missed what they had. He told her that he had realized some things after the relationship ended. Claire heard him, but she did not immediately reopen her heart, because she had learned something important. An apology can be sincere and still not mean the relationship should restart. Someone can genuinely regret hurting you and still not be capable of giving you the relationship you need. Feelings matter, but behavior matters more. Daniel wanted to meet. Claire agreed. They sat across from each other, and for the first time, she wasn't trying to convince him of anything. She wasn't trying to look perfect. She wasn't trying to prove that she had become happier without him. She was simply herself. And that made the conversation different. Daniel admitted that he had taken her for granted. He admitted that he had become comfortable receiving her love without fully appreciating what she was giving. He admitted that when problems appeared, he often avoided them instead of addressing them. And he admitted that choosing another woman had not solved the emotional problems he carried inside himself. Claire listened carefully. Then she asked him one question: what has actually changed? Daniel became quiet. That question was more important than, do you miss me? Because missing someone is easy. Changing for someone is harder. Anyone can miss the comfort of your presence. Anyone can remember the good nights. Anyone can become emotional when they realize they may never have access to you again. But genuine growth requires accountability. It requires someone to look at their own behavior without blaming circumstances. It requires them to understand the pain they caused. It requires them to do something differently. And Claire was no longer interested in potential. She had spent enough time loving what someone could become. Now she wanted to see what someone had actually become. Daniel told her that he had started working on himself. He had begun having conversations he previously avoided. He had realized that running away from discomfort did not make problems disappear. He had learned that relationships require participation. And most importantly, he told her he understood that if Claire ever allowed him back into her life, he could not expect her to trust him immediately. That mattered, because people who genuinely change do not demand instant trust. They understand that trust has a timeline. They understand that their previous actions created the distance. And they are willing to rebuild, slowly, consistently, without demanding applause for every small improvement. Claire respected that, but she still did not rush, because she had learned that forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. You can forgive someone and still choose not to return to the relationship. You can wish someone well and still know they are not healthy for your future. You can appreciate an apology and still maintain your boundary. That is not bitterness, that is wisdom. And perhaps the biggest transformation in Claire was that she no longer needed Daniel to regret his decision. Before, she had dreamed about the day he would realize what he had lost. She imagined him calling her. She imagined him apologizing. She imagined him saying, I made a mistake. But now that possibility was standing in front of her, and she discovered something surprising. It did not feel as powerful as she thought it would, because her healing had already happened. His regret could not give her back the months she had spent rebuilding herself. His apology could not erase every painful night. His return could not make her old insecurities disappear. She had already done that work herself. And that is why you should never make another person's regret the destination of your healing. You may never receive the apology you deserve. You may never see them understand what they did. You may never watch them regret their decision. And if your peace depends on seeing those things happen, you have handed your future to someone who is no longer responsible for it. Claire finally understood. She didn't need Daniel to lose. She needed herself to stop losing. And that is a completely different mindset. You don't win by making another woman lose. You don't win by becoming prettier than her. You don't win by making him jealous. You don't win by showing everyone how happy you are. You win when you stop playing a game you never needed to play, because there is no competition for a love that is right for you. The right relationship does not require you to convince someone that you are better than another person. It requires two people who freely choose each other. That does not mean relationships never experience uncertainty. They do. It does not mean people never make mistakes. They will. But there is a difference between a relationship experiencing difficulty and a relationship making you constantly question your worth. Claire had learned that difference, and now she had another realization. Maybe Daniel had not been the great love she lost. Maybe he had been the great lesson that prepared her for the love she would eventually recognize. That thought changed the way she looked at the past. She no longer saw the breakup as proof that she had failed. She saw it as a turning point. The relationship had shown her what she needed to heal. It had shown her where she needed stronger boundaries. It had shown her how easily she could abandon herself when she was afraid of losing someone. And it had taught her that love without self-respect eventually becomes exhaustion. She wasn't angry anymore. She was grateful for what she had learned. And that is a beautiful stage of healing, when the person who hurt you no longer has to become the villain in your story for you to move forward. You can acknowledge that they hurt you. You can acknowledge that they made choices you didn't deserve. And you can still release the anger, not for them, for yourself, because carrying resentment is another way of staying connected. Claire wanted freedom, so she gave herself permission to stop carrying the relationship. Whether Daniel returned or not, she would continue. Whether he changed or not, she would continue. Whether he regretted his decision or not, she would continue. That was the freedom she had been looking for. And then she realized something even deeper. The woman she had become after losing Daniel was stronger than the woman who had been desperate to keep him. She trusted herself more. She knew her boundaries. She knew her standards. She knew what emotional consistency looked like, and she knew what she would never accept again. So if Daniel wanted another chance, he would not be entering the same relationship. He would be meeting a different Claire, a woman who no longer needed to be chosen, a woman who could walk away, a woman who could love without begging, a woman who could forgive without forgetting, a woman who understood that being alone was painful, but being with someone who constantly made her feel unwanted was far more painful. And that is the transformation heartbreak can create when you allow it to teach you instead of destroy you. Because sometimes the greatest thing you can do after someone chooses another woman is not to become better than her. Become better for yourself. Become more peaceful. Become more confident. Become more intentional. Become more selective. Become more honest about what you need. Become the woman who no longer asks, how can I make him choose me? And starts asking, is this the kind of love I want to choose? That question changes everything. And Claire was about to face the final answer. Claire finally understood that the greatest victory was never getting Daniel to regret choosing another woman. The victory was becoming so secure in herself that his decision could no longer destroy her peace. She didn't hate him. She didn't hate the other woman. She simply accepted that their paths had separated. And that acceptance gave her something she had been searching for all along: freedom. If Daniel wanted another chance, he would have to prove that something had genuinely changed. If he didn't, Claire would still keep moving forward. because she had learned the lesson that heartbreak was trying to teach her. You don't have to compete to be loved. You don't have to beg someone to see your value. And you don't have to chase someone who has already chosen another direction. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is, I loved you, but I choose myself now. That is not losing, that is winning. Because when you stop fighting for someone else's choice, you finally become free to choose your own future. Maybe he chooses another woman. Maybe he never comes back. But neither outcome decides your worth. Let him make his choice and then make yours. Choose your peace. Choose your dignity. Choose the life that does not require you to beg for love. You were never meant to compete with another woman for a man's attention.